In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the especially merciful, peace be upon you, greetings to you on a new episode of From Ghamdi's Desk. This episode resumes our journey in the 23 questions series, and today marks the commencement of episode 119. The concept of Sunnah is today's focal point of examination. We are now in our fifth discussion on this subject. Let's start. Our gratitude to Ghamidi Sahab for sharing his time. The process by which the religion was conveyed to us from the Prophet, peace be upon him, is questioned. Through direct transmission across generations, general knowledge, consensus and continuous practice, spanning from Imam Shafi to Imam Sarakhsi and from Ibn Hazm to Allama Amidi, a unanimous scholarly consensus within the community and a collectively agreed perspective have been explored by Ghamidi Sahab, which highlights that this method is a definitive source of religious knowledge that ensures that the teachings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, are communicated without ambiguity. It is as unequivocal and certain as if we were hearing it directly from God's messenger. In this context, Ghamidi Sahab has presented the entire tradition of the Muslim community, showing that there is hardly any discord visible. The agreement with this scholarly consensus is complete. This source of knowledge is acknowledged by them and similarly acknowledged by you. In today's discussion, I aim to express the concerns and questions that arise among contemporary educated Muslims, and to address how they view this source of knowledge and to clarify the doubts they might hold. The primary question that I'll address to you concerns the current approach to research, where the methodology demands adherence to scientific research principles and requires citations for any claims made. If it attributes something to an author, the specific work and its publication details are demanded. Absent direct sources, methods like carbon dating are employed. Similarly, archaeological findings are sought to verify the age of an object. When such a vast transmission of knowledge is claimed, contemporary science tends to dismiss it as hearsay and argues that many popular beliefs exist amongst people. Thus, how should those skeptical of this view comprehend this source of knowledge?
The knowledge they present to you should be scrutinized in terms of its origin. Recall my discussion with some young individuals by the name of Javed Ahmed Ghamidi, which was broadcasted as well. There, the initial emphasis was on verifying the sources of our claims. The knowledge I possess is derived through my senses. I have been gifted with sight and hearing by God, so I declare something as my knowledge when it's verified through observation and personal experience. Another mode of knowledge acquisition is through realizing existential truths via senses. Then, through contemplation and deduction, I infer certain conclusions from them. I've mentioned that such deduction leads us from the observable to the unobservable, meaning it's something not physically present before me, nor audible, yet logical necessity compels us to accept another truth. This second mode has propelled human knowledge to its zenith. Using these methods, whatever is attained must then be passed on, whether in the present or the past. How would this transmission occur? Would angels descend to convey it to the next generation, or would a book be sent down to each person from the heavens? Consider the reality: an individual would report it. It's individuals who would report. So, what are the possibilities? An individual reports, or two report, or it could be 5, 10, a large group, or an entire nation, even at a global scale in today's context. These are the scenarios, right? Hence, it boils down to individuals. That is, for news to spread, it must be through people. Is there another method discovered by modern science for disseminating information? The innovations are merely tools. These tools capture our voices and broadcast them globally. Yet they transmit the voices of individuals like us. This voice could be of someone like me or you. It could be of a whole group of people sitting in a room like this, or potentially, it could be an entire nation's voice. Nevertheless, it remains human communication. Imagine the situation. A major event known as 9/11 occurred. It was a major event. It was witnessed by many. Journalists, bystanders near and far, observed it. And through technological means, this event was shared globally. All this was witnessed by individuals, and it was then transmitted by individuals. This process was augmented by tools, which enhanced the broadcast's impact. Yet, Upon close inspection, you'll find the transmission score relies on the individual. If global televisions broadcast a hoax fabricated by a fraudster, the story would spread worldwide, but its credibility hinges on the individual behind it. For example, we are told that an incident has happened, say, an author in England has written a wonderful book, or it is told that in such and such a laboratory, these have been the findings of a research. Similarly, the new scientific discoveries have been made, carried out, say, by Einstein or Newton. When these findings progress further, these devices enhance their power, while individuals are behind them. These may vary in number. It may be just 1, 2, or 4, or there might be a huge number of people behind it. Other than this, there hasn't been any other way till today. If it happens in future, that too would become the source of knowledge. However, it doesn't exist till now. Therefore, all matters require individual verification at every stage.
Understood. Okay, Ghamidi Sahab, considering the modern context where previously individuals wrote or verbally shared knowledge, but now with cameras capturing events directly, the intermediary seems absent. So to me, it appears that the individual is not the medium any longer. I'm directly witnessing the facts.
Indeed, you may view it, but if a camera is set up in a stunning location, say Kashmir or Naran, and you claim it's Switzerland, how can I distinguish the truth? Two cases exist. Either I visited it, forming part of my observation, allowing me to refute your claim, or other evidences will challenge it. Has technology advanced to a point where mere broadcasting convinces us without the need for human corroboration? No, we still rely on witnesses, either from the broadcasting end, confirming the claim's accuracy, or my prior knowledge and experiences validate it. If someone reports from Lahore, having lived there extensively, I might recognize many locations. It's my prior experiences that affirm the broadcast's accuracy. Say a person is reporting from Lahore. We have spent our lives there. You probably haven't spent much time there. However, I have spent 35 to 40 years there. I am familiar with many of its streets too. When a person is reporting, it is my experience which confirms it. I immediately recognize that this is the Bhati's lane, or Lohari's lane, or this is the inner city, or this is the Qaid-e-Azam highway. I recognize it. So it is my observation or my experience which, when it corroborates it, then I accept the news. Now, while claiming to broadcast from Lahore, while you are in fact in an Indian city, though it might be asserted, but verification comes either from the source's end or my previous experiences and observations. Thus, the points you raise depend on individual confirmation at each turn.
Right. Now, considering a modern scenario, cameras now include built-in GPS indicating the location, which might lead me to trust the device over the individual.
There's no need to rely solely on individuals if better means exist. Should more reliable methods emerge, we'll use those for information gathering. But until then, we depend on human verification at every step. Yet, it remains evident that in any scenario encountered, it's individuals who execute these tasks, meaning the tasks are ultimately carried out by individuals themselves. In the case of GPS, who input the data?
Individuals.
Yes, those are individuals as well. Thus, scrutinizing any source reveals it merely amplifies its capability, it assists, but at its core, it's the individual who is key. Behind each function stands a person. Thus, the trust vested in individuals, if in the future technology evolves to such a point where devices themselves start bearing witness, then we'll embrace it as a knowledge source. However, in our current world, nothing surpasses the reliability of the individual. That is, humans are essential, whether singular or in groups. Their reliability must be determined through thorough investigation. If a claim arises about a new virus being discovered, we scrutinize who makes the claim and their field of expertise. Is this person truly knowledgeable in the claimed domain? Such claims are subject to verification and scrutiny. Only then can we confirm the claim's validity, though not all matters require such rigorous verification. We don't always need a laboratory to confirm an event, as with the 9/11 example. Here, a vast audience has witnessed the event, which is giving its testimony such that it becomes globally recognized. Hence, discussion may persist about the event's specifics and actors, but its occurrence is undeniable and observable. In every domain of knowledge, the first consideration is the event's nature. That is, if the matter demands deep thought and scrutiny, mere observation by an individual isn't sufficient, as deeper inquiry and reflection raise further questions. For experiences like witnessing London as a city, seen by you, me, and countless others, it becomes an established historical fact. There's no doubt about it. Whenever London is mentioned, it's accepted as fact. However, if I'm curious whether a specific building exists on a particular London street, I begin my investigation. Thus, depending on the matter and its nature, we determine these things. Which modern means have replaced individuals in this process? It's still individuals who convey information, though they might utilize various devices, like placing a camera or microphone before them. Yet, if such means align with our prior experiences and observations, we then validate them. Even today, when something is presented, it's often questioned whether it could be a fabricated claim. It could have been altered or superimposed. Today's technology, just by virtue of its novelty and advances, possesses the capability to deceive.
A crucial point.
Each piece of knowledge requires scrutiny. What our scholars have stated, and I've elaborated upon, is that every aspect must be examined. They scrutinize every stage. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, arrived in this world, was it a prehistoric era? First, it was established that this event occurred within historical light. Since then, history has consistently tracked global events. Next, they detail the entire group of companions, and they explain how knowledge was passed from one generation to the next. Had recording devices existed then, they certainly would have been examined. There's no dismissing this knowledge source, but such technology didn't exist previously. So if the Prophet of God imparted something, it could only be transmitted through individuals. Beyond individuals, if someone wrote something, it again involves an individual. That is, an individual wrote it, which again must be verified by another individual. If you claim a book was compiled by Imam Bukhari, and Bukhari's book is handed to me to verify its authenticity as Bukhari's work, it must be validated.
A significant point, Ghamidi Sahab.
Thus, individuals are behind all such efforts, with technology merely enhancing their capabilities.
An important insight, you mentioned citing Allama Iqbal's work, yet verifying it as Iqbal's book relies again on a group of individuals forming the basis of our trust. Another example, Ghamidi Sahab, is the James Webb Space Telescope's view of the universe. Here, not even an individual is involved, as it's purely a device offering us insights with no human intermediary.
Has it truly offered us such insights? This is news to me. No, it's the people stationed there who have observed it, and they share their observations, presenting images as evidence. It's like someone visits London or Switzerland, and then captures photos and shares them, claiming to have been there. We trust you, otherwise, in today's world, one could easily fabricate such images and deceive the entire world. It's our trust in those people that conveys this knowledge to us. Beyond people, there are no other means. These tools are merely facilitators and hold no greater authority. To my knowledge, no tool exists that validates itself. To date, validation relies on individuals.
Right, Ghamidi Sahab, you've clarified this point. I present another scenario. During crucial moments in our lives, like air travel, we rely on technology to predict weather, not on individuals. We rely on a technological device. The gadget's sensors gauge atmospheric conditions, informing pilots of impending severe weather.
Who receives these predictions? Ultimately, it's an individual, right? The tool itself doesn't reach me. Here again, we depend on the individual.
Someone warned me of today's rain.
That involves individuals observing certain indicators. If you delve into it, it is exactly as what I had described. It's either based on my or another's observation and experience, or the person monitoring the device incorporates it into their experience. Either it is my observation or experience, or of the person who is sitting in front of that gadget. So that is a part of his observation and experience. Earlier, what we used to do was to look at the clouds in the sky, but now he could find it out without looking at the clouds, or he acquires some other information too. Just study the scenario post this. Now the process, reflection, and reasoning would begin. The observations he made were the existential truths, and putting all those together, he used his earlier knowledge to draw some inference from it. These are the indicators which make a forecast for rain at a certain place. They observe it, using previous methods of cloud observation or gather different data. Afterward, they employ reflection and reasoning. That is, they combine observational truths with prior knowledge to deduce predictions about potential rainfall at a specific location. This deduction, a fusion of observations, experiences, and logical reasoning, leads to a conclusion subsequently shared by individuals. So, I received this news through individuals. I'm not present there, nor are the gadgets before me. Both previous methods, experience or observation, and deductions from reasoning are conveyed by an individual. So the inference was relayed through the Prophet, God's peace be upon him. And there his truthfulness came to the fore, the reasoning came to the fore, based upon which he should be accepted as the Prophet. All that did not depend on the people. This wasn't reliant on people, but on intellectual exercise. Once accepted as the Prophet, his transmissions don't require further logical scrutiny. Had it been about logic and reasoning, it would remain subject to debate even today. They're sharing experiences. They assert that the Prophet bestowed this book upon us, that he mandated this salah upon us, hence we adhere to it. Thus, it should be part of an observation or experience, not predicated on logic or reasoning. It's conveyed through individuals, and without them, there's no alternative. But if something is deduced through logic and reasoning, becoming part of knowledge or information, like Einstein's theory of relativity, born from deep thought, it's initially shared by Einstein himself. Then, following him, those who comprehend it will continue its dissemination. So, the question becomes about the means of further sharing. That is, it will always be through reports and perpetuated by individuals.
Okay, Ghamidi Sahab, you've thoroughly explained this point. Now, considering modern scientific tools which allows us to remotely observe events or experiences, when we acknowledge the possibility of manipulating or fabricating audiovisual records where we can present a distorted reality, then there's the global Muslim community, dating back to when this knowledge tradition began, unlikely to have numbered more than a few 100,000. This community, with its distinct perspectives, agendas, and beliefs, when conveying news onwards, how can someone in distant Africa or Europe dismiss the possibility of manipulation, a concern applicable to modern methods for ancient transmissions as well?
The reasonings advanced by our great religious scholars are chiefly meant for the scenarios where such inquiries may emerge. In the absence of queries, the justifications weren't essential. This forms their logical discourse. Should you consider Imam Shafi, Imam Saraksi, and likewise, the senior figures from subsequent eras have laid out the justifications. Thus, upon the emergence of a query, the reasoning was forthcoming. Nonetheless, take a moment to reflect and observe. The individuals at the site of the event will witness it unfold. If an event occurred in New York with 2 towering structures brought down, then who will witness this unfold? Precisely those individuals located there. They will serve as its observers. Every individual is entitled to question it. Yet, witnessing will commence solely from that point. If Prophet Muhammad, God's peace be upon him, was born in Mecca, where he offered an invitation to some, and progressively numerous individuals were influenced by it, embraced faith, and on the foundation of that invitation, they started anew. Not merely living as Muslims, they also established a vast empire of their own. This empire expanded across several continents within a brief period of 10 to 15 years. Namely, all these events occurred within a span of 10 to 20 years. All these events that occurred, events that shook the world, they now need to be communicated further. Who will communicate it? Those who are part of it. Namely, if a fire incident occurred in Lahore, how could one expect someone from London to be aware of it? The individual from London would engage in analyzing it. The service we offer is simply analyzing and informing. Namely, we inform that this is how the information originated and how the Muslim community has communicated it. And look at Imam Saraksi's own words. He mentions that a vast number of individuals were present who had settled across broad regions and ventured into various areas. Thus he formulated two propositions and deduced that it is logically improbable. If someone analyzes and informs us that it isn't logically improbable, they hold the right to analyze and express their disagreement. Whenever an argument is presented, its acceptance is based solely on its logical merit. What alternative do humans possess? Upon visiting England, I mentioned that distinguished figures like Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, Iqbal, and Shibli were born among us. They have authored certain works. Subsequently, if someone asks, "Why should I believe your assertion?" they can then seek confirmation from Shibli. Of course, only I would provide this information as it originates from my locale. They might inquire if the rest of the world acknowledges my claim. What does the rest of the world imply? The world pertaining to my region, the people from my vicinity. Thus, I state that various institutions echo the same knowledge. Various books mention this. Every educated individual in our nation is aware that these esteemed scholars were born among us. So, what have I accomplished? Namely, my claim was individual, it was personal. When I gathered numerous other attestations, then the other party deemed it valid. This argument is presented based on logical reasoning. A test of wisdom and intellect exists globally based on logical reasoning. If someone challenges it, they are free to reject it. What impact does it have? An individual might argue that what you claim to have seen, this too could become a subject of debate. This isn't the argument. As human beings, our means of information transmission have always been through human channels. No alterations have occurred in these methods to date. All these methods serve either to bolster support or to verify, yet they cannot stand as independent sources of knowledge.
لِكَسْرَاتِ عَدَدِهِمْ وَتَبَاعُيُنِ أَمْكِنَتِهِمْ. You refer to Imam Saraksi. A massive crowd dispersed across various locales testifying to the event renders it logically implausible for it to be false. You question how it could be contested. Ghamidi Sahab, I present an illustration to you. Here I am seated, I let the camera roll and adopt a concealed guise, portraying an entirely distinct persona of myself, broadcasting live globally. A vast multitude would witness it, millions watching me, and diverse geographical distribution would also be evident. People globally would view me live on YouTube. They would attest and propagate further that they saw a certain individual at the Ghamidi Center. Now, considering reality, I have disguised myself despite diverse locations and a vast multitude. Erroneous information is disseminated.
Your example is exceedingly apt. They have neither lied nor can their statements be contested. You have chosen a disguise for yourself. Now, how will this be discerned? An individual will expose this truth.
Will it emerge through logic and scrutiny?
It could emerge through scrutiny and logic, or it might be verified by other means. Thus, it will be verified. An exemplary case exists in history itself. A divine miracle was manifested. God conveys that when his prophet was rejected by his people, among his disciples, one was a traitor. This narrative is briefly mentioned in the Quran too, though most details are found in the Bible. Thus, it is revealed through the Bible that his appearance was transformed to resemble Prophet Jesus. Now he faces crucifixion as Prophet Jesus. Hundreds of thousands might have been observers, or perhaps only a few hundred. Namely, under normal circumstances, any claim could be made. All these assertions would be scrutinized, namely, whether truly lakhs, thousands, hundreds, or merely 10 or 20 were present. This scrutiny constitutes the initial phase. Subsequently, it became a belief among thousands, namely, this event transpired. The account is accurate. Upon our scrutiny, we realized they weren't deceiving. What they conveyed was utterly truthful. God informed us in the Quran that Prophet Jesus was neither crucified nor slain. It appeared so to them. The situation was ambiguous. The Gospel of Barnabas details how it was made ambiguous. Thus, this alternate narrative, originating from another source, cast doubt on the observer's account, not as a blatant falsehood, but rather a miraculous occurrence had taken place. Now, who discloses this miraculous event? The Quran. Thus, with the Quran's corroboration, if this narrative prevails, then the alternative is disregarded. Here, the same process of the application of analysis and reasoning was adopted in this case too. However, that information wasn't a lie. That news was absolutely true. The issue that arose as a result has now been analyzed. Therefore, in the same way you installed a camera and made a news viral, the entire world knew that it has been done in this manner. Later on, we learned that the person who was proclaiming himself to be a great American scientist or had stated such a thing on a responsible forum was actually a liar. So now the alternative news makes the round. When both the news became contradictory, so now both would be analyzed for their claims. When analysis led us to the point that the statement of the Quran is the statement of God, then we rejected the other information. However, what do we disregard? Do we assert that the witnesses conspired in a falsehood? No, the witnesses were misled, and such misconceptions could affect you or me alike. Thus, the account I relayed, if someone scrutinizes it and asserts that the Prophet was impersonated by an impostor, kindly present such evidence. Thus, scrutiny is universally applied. The scrutiny by our religious scholars revealed no such thing. Therefore, the account is accepted based on conventional sources. This method is customary. If a witness testifies, the world bases their acceptance on it. Judgments are made and penalties are imposed accordingly. A lawyer interrogates the witness and evaluates his credibility. He illustrates that a certain individual posing in a certain manner merely needs to remove his disguise. He has adopted a specific camouflage. Thus, an alternative narrative emerges and challenges his authenticity. Thus, we scrutinize and refute it. So, let the world present an account that the event never occurred in Mecca, and all these individuals were gathered at a specific location, deceived by an impostor, and the populace was duped. Thus, an alternative narrative emerges, which is scrutinized in the same manner. Isn't this the global norm for every such situation? When a new narrative surfaces, it undergoes the same scrutiny. However, narratives must originate from individuals, and scrutiny follows the same logical procedure as Imam Sarakhsi demonstrated and illustrated. Namely, narratives originate from individuals, scholars scrutinize them, and what is their method of scrutiny? They explain how the narrative was conveyed. Namely, initially, they clarify the narrative source. If he states it originated from a single individual, he invites you to examine the individual's character, his life's trajectory, and his era of existence. What are these? These are logical considerations, not supernatural. In the same manner, logical arguments are presented. If this argumentative process is challenged and an alternative is proposed, however, what are all these statements? Namely, certain scenarios or conditions might also occur. Numerous events transpire globally which are scrutinized.
Ghamidi Sahab, if scrutiny is applied, then paramount importance is given to thought and reasoning. Why do we assert that knowledge conveyed through consensus and continuous transmission is infallible and devoid of error, and, for instance, the event being communicated onwards relies on people's testimonies? So if everything undergoes scrutiny, then the essence truly lies in intellect and reasoning. Thus, any received information must be validated through the process of thought and logic.
This is incredible. Look, when I perceive this as a table, the decision that it is a table is made by my intellect. Should my intellect cease to function, I might, despite recognizing it as a table, begin to refer to it as a chair. Numerous individuals lose their mental equilibrium. In every scenario, intellect plays a crucial role, my friend. Our entire dialogue is predicated on logical reasoning, meaning without the intellectual agreement between us, the conversation ends. Every aspect undergoes scrutiny. Hence, Imam Sarakhsi and Imam Shafi, whose excerpts I shared with you, engage in logical argumentation. Just consider Imam Shafi's writings, he asserts. Currently, before me stand individuals. Who are these people? They are believers in a prophet. Their successive generations pass before my eyes. Even now, a handful of companions lingered until the early 2nd century, while the entire generation of followers and their successors are present. The religion and events they narrate, whether it's the ritual prayer or the presence of the Quran among them, the intellect concludes that none of their number could be oblivious to them. Notice, the initial premise itself is intellectually driven. Thus, the intellect is never disengaged, nor does it halt when my eyes behold something. The intellect is the adjudicator. When it utilizes the senses to comprehend something, the verdict still lies with the intellect. When considering another source, it remains the intellect's verdict. As you persist in your inquiry regarding the camera and similar advancements, who will determine if the camera now serves as a reliable source?
The intellect.
Precisely so. Hence, logical evaluation is indispensable in every circumstance.
All right, Ghamidi Sahab, whenever a disagreement arises, you suggest that through intellect and reflection, it can be countered with logic. Should someone approach me claiming to relay news from people, I would inevitably employ logic to question it. Should I pose a question, you would respond by highlighting the sheer volume of individuals involved. Yet, in rebuttal, I might present a scientific fact, as many contemporary individuals assert, for example, claiming what is identified as Mecca to inform you that the mosques erected were not oriented towards the Kaaba but towards Petra. So they claim to be presenting tangible evidence, or by conducting carbon dating or unveiling historical artifacts as evidence, I would offer tangible proof, whereas the opposing party might argue, citing the authority of eminent figures. Thus, on one side lie tangible facts, and on the other, the testimonies of individuals.
It doesn't unfold in that manner. The mosques constructed in ancient times and the evidence challenged question whether they possess the means to accurately determine the Qibla direction from distant regions. Consequently, discrepancies might arise. The discussion revolves around a mosque. Who designated it as a mosque? Individuals. Upon reviewing its history, it's evident that individuals built the mosque. Someone might argue that individuals did not construct the mosque. What you're highlighting is that prior to recognizing the mosque as a mosque and establishing its Qibla, all this information has been furnished by individuals. Now, possessing a device, one can ascertain the Qibla direction with greater accuracy. Such precision wasn't available in ancient times. Estimations were made, leading to minor variances. How significant are these discrepancies? For instance, whether Mecca existed, it still exists today. Mecca has endured for ages. Books have been written about it. Its entire history is documented. This discourse isn't a recent development. An extensive body of knowledge has been preserved. Someone now attempting to determine mosques based on their Qibla orientation, I consider such efforts trivial and academically irrelevant.
Okay, Ghamidi Sahab, let's extend this discussion. Please clarify the recognized history or knowledge transmitted across generations based on their observations. What we observe is that deductions from this knowledge comprise either historical information or details about cities and individuals. Who traveled where, the existence of kingdoms and empires, yet, when Islam embraced this mode of knowledge transmission, it also encompassed complex concepts and intricate doctrines, mandating adherence 5 times daily, encompassing actions, recollections, and obligations, including calculations, as seen in the case of zakat, questioning whether this mode of knowledge transmission inherently possesses the capacity to convey information of such intricate nature, since historically this mode has only communicated fundamental concepts, but it lacks the detail associated with them.
With all due respect, your query is valid. However, the notion that it constitutes complex knowledge, what complexity does it entail? Examine them individually. Consider the Quran. The Quran is approached and interpreted as a text. Undoubtedly, accessing it requires extensive knowledge. Understanding its language is essential. Familiarity with its context is necessary. Analytical interpretation is required. Yet, are Muslims claiming expertise in these aspects?
No.
Or is it the Muslims' knowledge under discussion? Their claim pertains to the Quran's text.
They assert the existence of its 6,000 verses.
That is the book's current form?
Yes.
Even a child aged 7 to 8 memorizes the Quran. Unaware of the meanings of its initial few verses, you argue it's a complex matter. How then does such complexity get transmitted to him? My brother, its memorization facilitates its transmission. Today, if you accompany me, we can witness religious schools where children aged 7, 8, 9 and 10 will recite the entire Quran for you. It indicates that the object under discussion is not complex. It involves memorizing words and transmitting them to others. Similarly, some individuals documented it. Once documented, I transmitted it further, as did you. Currently, in the world, the books you publish, what do you undertake? That is, upon printing and publication of a book, a team conducts its proofreading. Every word undergoes scrutiny. While they read, what exactly are they doing? If the author has spent something, the text is verified against it. If printed versions exist, comparisons are made. After individuals have completed this process, what have they been doing? Notice, when it's claimed 50 documents were compared, again, the emphasis is on quantity. What are these 50 documents? They are documents arranged by individuals. Similarly, the Quran's written transmission also lacks complexity. A scribe, even one not highly educated, merely capable of writing, copies the entire Quran. So where does the complication arise? And a teacher from our madrasa enables an 8-year-old to memorize the entire Quran. How does complexity emerge in this scenario? This concerns the Quran. Here, understanding or interpreting the Quran isn't the issue. Its exegesis isn't the issue. Its text is what's being discussed. So you can witness today that children are transmitting it, and you can see how young people are compiling its text, or how scribes, who are not scholars, let alone knowledgeable, are writing it. This is a common experience. What exactly does a scribe do? He observes the words and replicates them elsewhere. What does a young child do? He memorizes the words taught to him and reproduces them verbatim. Forgive the comparison, but even a parrot is capable of this. Where then does the question of complexity arise? It concerns only the memorization. The Quran, it is taught, read to him. He repeatedly recites it to memorize and then passes it on. Salah, where does complexity enter the picture? Offering 4 units of Salah takes 5 to 7 minutes at most. The maximum units are 4. The actions are few, allow me, and I can summarize them in 3 sentences. There are only 2 mandatory recitations during standing and bowing, phrases like Allahu Akbar and the recitation of the Quran. And in the Quran, there's Surah Al-Fatiha and a portion of it. What else is there? You suggest that the situation becomes exceedingly complex. Where is the complexity? It's such a simple matter. And if a Muslim youth reaches adulthood without any prior notice, he would discover in his local mosque, within minutes, the entire procedure becomes clear to him. That is, if he needs to memorize recitations, just Surah Fatiha with its 6 verses and perhaps Surah Ikhlas. Thus, for recitation, the prayer is conveyed. As for the remembrances, Allahu Akbar and Sami Allahu liman hamida are learned, and the physical actions involved are simply standing, bowing, and prostrating in a specific sequence. What more is there? This routine is straightforward and a daily obligation for Muslims, that is, something practiced daily 5 times by all companions who have taught it to subsequent generations. Even today, in our tumultuous times, in every Muslim community, wherever they settle, the establishment of a mosque or prayer space initiates this tradition. Thus, the notion of complexity in this context is unfathomable. I often advise people unfamiliar with the Hajj or Umrah rituals to embark on the journey without worry, to observe others and follow along, and this would enable them to perform these rituals without needing formal instruction. Such simplicity characterizes the rituals of Hajj and Umrah, comprising only a handful of steps. If requested, I could summarize them briefly and clarify any perceived complexity. Where then does any complication arise? Neither does it involve deep understanding, nor grammatical nuances, nor sentence structure, nor philosophical debates. It's purely a practical matter, observable in practice. Once understood, it's straightforwardly passed on, not as a mere concept, but as a tangible practice witnessed by every Muslim child from their parents, or if not from their parents, then certainly in the neighborhood mosque. So, as you questioned, whence comes this complexity?
Ghamidi Sahab, your explanation is quite enlightening. During our discussion, you mentioned that the religion delivered by the Prophet, peace be upon him, exists within historical light, and those who received this religion deemed it their duty to learn and propagate it to future generations. When you stipulate that it has been transmitted in the light of history, thereby ensuring its reliability, then arises the question: if such large numbers of people spread across diverse lands were involved in this transmission in historical times, why then do we distinguish between prehistoric and historic periods? Surely everything should be considered historically documented, given the vast numbers involved in passing down these realities.
There's no question about it. This is precisely how it occurs. Whatever is transmitted globally happens through those 2 mechanisms, either by a few individuals or by a large group. This method remains consistent. However, over time, the period begins to blur. Interruptions and discontinuities may occur. For instance, a civilization might start documenting certain events, gradually fading from history. This phenomenon, known as inqita, it was elaborated by Imam Sarakhsi through 3 criteria. He argued that we must ascertain whether its inception is observable. How can its beginning be visible? If the Prophet had recited the Quran secluded in a cave, such an origin would be beyond our reach. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was born in Mecca, where he announced his message. Had his proclamation gone unheard or unheeded, with only a small number accepting faith, the matter might have concluded there. You're aware of Mecca's residents attempting to assassinate him, ma'az Allah, and had they succeeded, God forbid, this entire episode might have vanished into history. But did that occur?
No.
Subsequently, he migrated to Medina, where an empire was established that challenged the world's major powers. Thus, under the spotlight of history, this entire event, during the last decade of the Prophet's life, became an international phenomenon. This is why we say it stands in the full glare of history. And how do we define prehistoric events? They either have a modest beginning involving few people, or a significant movement comprising a multitude dwindles over time. Thus, Imam Sarakhsi said that the origins must be in the light of history. The last era, the current one, would obviously be right before our eyes, but the middle part should also be in light of history. If these two things exist with regard to any incident, and even if it dates back to 5,000 years, that too would be considered likewise.
Right, Ghamidi Sahab, you elaborated this point as well. I am presenting another example to you. A person in India, say in Delhi, if he is sitting in the Nizamuddin locality, a Hindu decides to convert to Iman and he goes to a masjid of the Muslims and there he finds a shrine or a tomb inside the masjid and people are prostrating before it. He comes out and tries another 5 or 6 locations and he finds such a large number of people who are prostrating to graves inside the masjids and they consider their prostration as Islam. In essence, then if that person considers the point that such a huge number of people transmitting some information, then it must be true as they must have seen their ancestors. Hence, on this basis, the number of innovations in the religion should be declared as the deen.
You cited the example of Delhi. If that person goes to the different mosques of Delhi, then all the realities would become evident to him there itself. He would not need to step out of his city. In Delhi, there would be mosques run by Deobandis too. There would be mosques of Barelvis too. Ahli Hadith would also be present there. And if some religious innovation is being practiced, the scholars who reject them would also be there. Hence, the first question would begin from there itself. The same point has been stated by Imam Sarakhsi, our period, which he terms as the last period. First of all, when you start investigating, you will see whether the Muslims, wherever they are in the world, whether they are presenting such and such thing as deen and attributing it to the Prophet. This would be the question, right? The scholarly research would begin from this point. If the answer to this question is found in the positive, then only we will proceed further. Thus, the example you provided about religious innovation cannot even begin to be established within Delhi itself. It would be dismissed right there. If he ventures to Lahore, it would be similarly dismissed there. No religious innovation has ever achieved such consensus, and if you seek the historical origin of any innovation, individuals will inform you when and how it began and which people adopted it. In fact, I'd argue further that those who introduce a religious innovation, if approached to inquire whether it dates back to the Prophet, peace be upon him, they'd promptly deny it, advocating its goodness as their rationale. The history of an innovation doesn't start abruptly. Its conclusion isn't predetermined. It progresses from its inception through various stages, as Imam Ibn Hazm articulated, حَتَّى تَبْلُغَ بِهِ النَّبِي صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, requiring this thorough process. In your example, merely visiting 5 mosques in your city or consulting 7 to 8 scholars would promptly clarify it as a clear innovation, and it lacks any scriptural basis. One scholar might endorse it, while another expressly forbids it. Where then does consensus or continuous practice occur? No innovation has ever formally commenced. Show me any innovation meeting even the initial criteria.
Ghamidi Sahab, you've provided a profound explanation. Let me present another scenario for your consideration. We observe facts being passed down through generations. However, research and knowledge eventually reveal that the middle 3 or 4 generations which purportedly transmitted this information are untraceable. I'll offer a commonplace example. Since our birth, we've been led to believe a certain astronomical model which had been passed down by numerous generations as established fact, but gradually, with time, people realize that contemporary discoveries show that this wasn't the case.
Someone must have observed it. That is, the information you received resulted from celestial observations, which were then passed on. Others are free to conduct their own observations. The example you've provided doesn't involve the transmission of knowledge per se. It is not a question of transmission. It's always open to investigation. The sky remains as accessible to me as it was to Aristotle. Aristotle famously claimed, merely as an example, women have fewer teeth than men. Women are still among us, allowing for direct verification. Thus, this doesn't represent a transmission of knowledge. The scenario involves an event that has passed, no longer accessible for direct experience.
A crucial insight. In such instances, it's the individual we rely upon. Thus, when asserting their reliability, and if they are few, their characters are scrutinized along with their narration chains. Their memory and ability to retain information are evaluated. Why this scrutiny? Not because the Quran mandates it, but because logic dictates that these claims be investigated. Similarly, if a vast collective asserts something, and their numbers are so substantial that a consensus on falsehood seems illogical, the first point of contention is that logic itself rejects such a premise. Should anyone argue that logic might concede, they must provide justification. This forms part of our everyday logical reasoning. Logic refuses to accept the notion that an entire nation fabricated the existence of Washington, the concept of George Washington. This idea is untenable as an entire nation presents us with this figure. Their collective body of knowledge introduces him. Every history book about America corroborates this narrative. If I were in Pakistan, logic would similarly dismiss the notion that 22 million people are collectively mistaken about Pakistan's founding in 1947 by Qaid-e-Azam. This is established through logical scrutiny, and our sensory knowledge is also subjected to such mental evaluation. In every instance, logic must be the anchor, as Allama Amidi's final remark emphasizes. If someone rejects these logical foundations, it becomes evident, Zahara Jununahu, they are not of sound mind. Without sanity, no accurate judgments can be made. Gandhi Sahab, you've beautifully articulated all points. Just one query, for instance. If I were to ask you today to disaggregate the established history of your region, how many individuals would I need to consult to assert that it meets the criteria of Kaffa Anil Kaffa, Ilmi Amma, Ijma and Tawatur to such an extent that the possibility of a collective lie is completely negated? What figure would you suggest? 10, 11, 15 or 20? How many would it be?
I needn't provide a figure. Instead, I'd ask you on what grounds you accept certain historical facts, like the establishment of the Mughal Empire, or Qaid-e-Azam founding Pakistan, or Mahatma Gandhi being a prominent leader in the freedom struggle, or Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru being India's first Prime Minister. What basis do you have for these beliefs? Upon examination, you'll find it's the testimony of individuals. Should someone contest these with a claim to the contrary in a book, you'd question their sanity. Why? Because these narratives have been learned through individuals, and those individuals number so vastly that their collective error is implausible. Say, someone were to say, Pandit Nehru wasn't the first Prime Minister of India. Have you ever counted those individuals? When we say such a large number, it implies beyond the need for enumeration. That is, the count exceeds mere tens or hundreds, to such an extent that another criterion by Imam Sarakhsi isn't just about their quantity, because that can still be fabricated if too many people, say an army, gather together at one place, but their diversity of origins, analyzing the companions group as a rational exercise. He pointed out that historically, it's evident the companions originated from various locales dispersed far and wide, and it is thus unimaginable to assume that there was any collective conspiracy to fabricate a religion. They uniformly stated that a person named Muhammad, peace be upon him, proclaimed his prophethood, they heard from him, met him, and received such teachings from him. What is all this? The mention of such a large number is a deduction of reason. Notice, numerous global facts don't require precise quantification. If I describe a mountain as large, a mere glance suffices for agreement. So too with vast numbers of people, so that you too can then reflect on the question and ask yourself, that can such a huge number deliberately conspire? For example, can Pakistan's 22 million people be deemed to conspire in a falsehood about its founding? Thus, this level of acknowledgement typically applies to universally accepted facts.
Right. Okay. Ghamidi Sahab, as our discussion often circles back to Pakistan, we observe a national tendency to relay hearsay information. Should this become a national characteristic and becomes evident in clear examples, then in such a society, even historically transmitted information, wouldn't the nation's integrity, honesty, and behaviors come under scrutiny? Consider, if today we inquire in a market about someone and thousands, even across cities, label the individual a fraudster or embezzler, What then of a nation's credibility in transmitting established facts, given such a character?
Consider any news worldwide. From your life experience, it's always an isolated report. It never reaches the level of continuous widespread narration. Upon scrutiny, it often transforms into a rumor, and upon further investigation, falls short even of being a solitary report. The originators typically disappear, precluding any direct inquiry. Hence, our experts instruct that its inception should be clearly visible.
Meaning the act of theft, for example, should be witnessed.
The claim is, every individual in Lahore states, this person, in this manner, committed theft, witnessed by 200,000. Do rumors propagate this way?
No.
Rumors spread as hearsay without a traceable origin. Upon examination, they lack coherence or a verifiable source. Thus, the start and conclusion should be known, as our scholars have scientifically delineated this principle.
Ghamidi Sahab, concluding this session with the last question. Knowing that people of varied backgrounds, tastes, and mental approaches cannot be uniformly swayed, and if they collectively affirm something, they must have truly experienced it rather than fabricating it. This logic is understandable. However, considering the potential influence of states or governments with their significant power, could they not have manipulated consensus or continuous narration and threatened dissenters with imprisonment if they don't believe and propagate it? Why dismiss this possibility? Given your earlier mention of variations in Quranic readings enforced in the Maghreb, Northwest Africa, had this not been documented, locals might claim long-standing adherence to such readings of the Quran.
It's impossible for such state interventions not to become news.
Meaning state intervention itself becomes a topic of discussion?
Upon any state intervention, like the enforcement of a specific Quranic reading by the Ottomans, for instance, that act would instantly become news, later narrated in the same vein, either as an isolated report, authored in a book, or as widespread testimony by an entire community, nation, or humanity. This itself is the news. The day this news generates, the very same day that source of knowledge would start its course too. Hence, this too would come into our knowledge. Just try and formulate any such news in history. Whenever this would happen, you will see that it will start getting transmitted further and further. This is why I said that if you cite the example of a religious innovation, its transmission takes place along with its entire history. If we stand in the light of its history, the innovation which will come into existence, we will know the day it came into existence. We will learn about its origin, and its entire history would be transmitted either by a few individuals or transmitted by an entire region or by the entire group, community or nation, or by the whole of humanity.
Ilme amma naqlul kafa anil kafa, and ijma and tawatur, the way our ummah presented this source of knowledge and the way you sort of defended its reality and strength against the scholarly doubts which grow in the mind of a person in modern times. Each and every point was put to Ghamidi Sahab, which he elaborated it with absolute clarity that this source of knowledge cannot be written off. This is a great fort, and to raise it down, we would have to necessarily negate all the realities of the world. This source of knowledge is firm and established. The religion given by the Prophet to this source of knowledge, what was that? We shall take this discussion further. Our time runs out now. We shall be back in your service again. Thank you very much for your time till now.
Thank you very much.